What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So today we have a critique for Gotham Knights that I think I've levied in a whole separate video, and it's about the UI of the game. Now, one of the reasons I actually have Marvel's Avengers here on the screen is so that you would see the UI for that game itself, and you will see that, in a sense, it is a little bit much more pleasing to look at than, in my opinion anyways, than Gotham Knights. Now, apparently, I remember the first time that we got to see that, Gotham Knights UI, we had a conversation about it. In fact, one of my most watched videos, which I titled Gotham Knights Needs a Lot of Work, I remember, in that video, I was talking about the Gotham Knights trailer. And I talked about how I thought that the trailer and the UI that was shown was not necessarily the most appealing aspect of the game. Now, I got people telling me, well, it's just a placeholder. That's what some people said. It's just a placeholder and this is not going to be the UI of the game. Well, come to realize that this is most likely going to be the case in terms of when the game releases, which is also interesting because it kind of clues us into possibly when Gotham Knights, had already started its own development and how much, this game has actually been in a more advanced state, when you actually look at the way things are. I think something that also brought this up was one of our audience members had posted a picture that was actually used to first reveal Gotham Knights back in 2018. And one of the developers actually went ahead and commented about the hairstyle that, she was actually, rocking at that time and said, I missed that hairstyle. And that audience member of ours, I think they're on Twitter as well, too. I can't remember exactly who it was. Remind me if it's you. And they said, how far into development were you guys? Well, at that time, that developer had not answered the question yet. But it's really interesting to see the different design philosophies, number one. Number two, it's very, very telling that, the design pattern of this game is following some, sequence or some style that for some, they've actually expressed like, okay, this is not necessarily the best UI for me. And to be very fair, I remember talking about this at first and I said, this game needs, some, tweaking in a sense, maybe some color, elements that probably need to be taken a look at closely. And, some people said, for them it was fine. Some people said for them it wasn't necessarily, a big problem. Now, in my opinion, it is not a big problem. That's just the truth. It's a UI that its job is to give you information. So the look and the feel of a UI, although, can be in a sense sometimes pleasing and sometimes not pleasing and can have an effect on some players' experience. For me, I just think it's in a position where for a AAA game, I don't think that this is the standard that needs to be, modified in a sense. Now, you can hound me all you want and say, okay, well, the game's already gone gold. You don't expect them to start going ahead and making tweaks to the UI. But I can argue against that because this thing about the UI, is something that I've seen in terms of development, and how that actually goes. One thing about, UI development in a video game is, you can actually, and especially in Unreal Engine 4, I guess I should speak to that, because I'm, in a sense, much more aware of how that process goes, is things like color, schemes and things like font size and text and all of that can actually be tweaked in a sense. And I think for you to be able to, modify the Gotham Knights UI, what you probably need are very small changes like font size, text, impact, the way the text actually is, bold and all of the above. I think those are things that can be modified even after the fact to really make for a pleasing UI representation. I noticed that the font size is actually a little imposing, just a little bit. Now, it could also be the way the footage was captured and shown to us that made the font size feel a little imposing in a sense. And for some people, that may not be a big problem. But in my case, I think, maybe allow for the font to be a little, transparent in a sense. But then you also have parameters that they've also put in place that will probably highlight some of these things if you were to scroll down. Like these stats here, you notice that once you scroll down, that the stats actually pop out in terms of their brightness. Also, the color system of presenting the data seems a little all over the place. And if you look at, say, this particular stat here, Jumpstart suit says 93. Well, why does a stock suit show 40? I guess it's trying to maybe represent its rarity. And this color scheme seems a little bit like way out there. If there's a way that they can actually show you the, rarity of your gear without having to use these, very interesting neon coloration, I think that might be something that also speaks to the UI itself and make it a little bit more clean. Now, I have to also give a little bit of credit where it's due. The menu that is actually on the top left corner, and even some of the represented level systems, I think those are actually pretty good. They use these very plain colors, black, white, gray. And I think they actually do, provide a clean environment. It's where you start to have, these other neon colors that actually, in a sense, they throw me off. I don't know why. And, I think this is probably something that can be even modified a little bit. Like, this is a legendary rarity suit. The legendary is written in, yellow. And then you also have these stats in this green color. I guess this is a color thing that maybe doesn't really match for me in a sense. Maybe, if anything, you can actually represent it by actually using that purple color in the corner here like they've done. If you notice on the bottom corner of this little item bar, there's a 7 that shows you the rarity, and then that Jumpstart suit itself and the stat being 93, that 93 itself can actually be slightly modified. Also, the font size can be modified a little bit just to make it look a lot more clean. That's one thing about UI elements is font size really does speak to the game, and even text and all of the above. If you notice this Marvel Avengers UI, there is that aspect in terms of the font size being somewhat minimal. And then finally, this is my last critique of it, and I'll still play the game if they make no change at all. I'm just saying that this could be modified even before release. We do have over a month left to go. And is the transparency of the background. Now, this one is going to be a little interesting because I don't necessarily know how they program this game. And that transparency of the background, in my opinion, is something that we have to kind of look at. So this background is using a gradient of, in a sense, there's a purple gradient on the bottom here. There's a white and actually maybe a blue and a black, hue at the back in terms of the background. Honestly, those colors, they seem really dull in a sense. If you think about, say, other UIs, what they do to mitigate this is they make their UI somewhat representative of a transparent background in a sense. Like, once you fire up the UI, then, it imposes itself on top of the background, but then you can see some sort of a, behind the scenes type deal. It could be something custom like a picture or like a moving scene. I don't think they should do the moving scene one. They could nonetheless just do like a picture where it's, it's just back there. And if you think about this one here, the Avengers one here, if you actually look at the UI, you'll notice that it's actually sitting in front of a picture in a sense. Like once you fire it up, there's this little picture on the background. It's a moving type image that's showing your training area. That's what you see here, and it has a little bit of text that's moving on the background if you actually wanted to take a very good look at it. But again, I said this is actually a small thing in my opinion. So I decided to go ahead and break this down a little bit compared to what I did in my first time that I mentioned it, so that we could see and look at the highlights and look at some of the lowlights. Now, in terms of your gameplay, when you're already playing the game, the fact that you can actually also take on a minimalistic approach, that's also very commendable. I like the way that they're able to allow for you to be able to just remove a whole bunch of stuff from your screen. Flying numbers or popping damage information, that can be removed, and you can pretty much, it seems like, make the UI suit your own specific tastes. So these are just a few things that I feel like, for a quality of life perspective, will probably, give the game that little polish that people may be looking for. But again, it's one of those things where if this is the design decision they're deciding to go with, I'm hoping that they actually have a very solid reason for it. Sometimes, it's a matter of maybe as the game comes out, they will probably hear the exact same thing from somebody, and you'll probably see them maybe go back and patch it, in quote, patch it. Or by the time the game comes out, this truly would probably be a placeholder. And I'm hoping that that's probably the case in terms of this particular aspect of the conversation. So thanks for watching the video. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon. Peace out.